Hello good people, I'm going to continue talking about the good old days. How old this time? Well, some 3.8 billion years. Around this time, the first fully functioning cells, known as prokaryotes, emerged out of the primordial soup of organic molecules. The word stems from Greek, pro meaning before, and karyon meaning kernel or nut or nucleus. These cells did not have a nucleus. You might already guess that there are also cells that have a nucleus. More on them later. When it comes to prokaryotes, there are two domains, archaea and bacteria. The word archaea stems from Greek and it translates to the ancient ones. The word bacteria also stems from Greek and could be translated as a small staff or a cane or a rod. This is because the first bacteria observed were rod-shaped. At this stage, we are not going to explore the differences between archaea and bacteria. Suffice it to say that archaea represent the earliest form of life on Earth and that the bacteria emerged about 500 million to 1 billion years later. Prokaryotes are unicellular organisms. Each cell represents an individual. Their internal organization is relatively simple. They reproduce asexually, which, although somewhat boring, is rather efficient. There are only a few organelles and their biochemistry is limited. However, do not underestimate the prokaryotes. Over time, they have evolved a variety of nutritional and metabolic adaptations. They also had and continue to have an enormous influence on the environment and the life that follows. Some 3.5 billion years ago, the first cyanobacteria evolved. These prokaryotes started using light energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into simple sugars and molecular oxygen. This process is known as photosynthesis and will be explored later. The sugars, much like today, were used as food. The oxygen, from the point of view of the cyanobacteria, was a waste byproduct that was released into the environment. Initially, the oxygen reacted with the exposed iron to give iron oxides, better known as rust. The oxygen reacted with other metals too, but at some stage all the metals available on the surface were oxidized. The unreacted oxygen started to accumulate in the atmosphere. It took another billion years, but over time, oxygen became a significant feature of the atmosphere, and because it is very reactive, this free molecular oxygen probably caused the extinction of a lot of organisms at the time. This period is known as the Great Oxidation Event. There were also winners here. Some prokaryotes continued to adapt and evolve and started using oxygen to aid their metabolism. In fact, organisms that can use oxygen have a greater metabolic efficiency. They can produce more energy for themselves, and that energy, among other things, can be used to procreate in greater numbers and more often. All of this pushed evolution further. Evolution is not all about competition. It is often about cooperation between two or more different organisms. In biology, we talk about symbiosis, which comes from Greek and stands for living together. There are three main types of symbiosis. Mutualism, where both organisms benefit from a relationship. Commensalism, where one benefits while the other is not affected. And parasitism, where one benefits at the expense of the other. Insert some sort of relationship joke here. About 2 billion years ago, certain prokaryotes embarked upon some graphic R-rated mutualism. At some stage, one prokaryote took up residence within another prokaryote, and they started evolving together. It would take about 1 billion years of this process to give rise to more complex cells known as eukaryotes. These are cells with a nucleus. The word eu is Greek for true or good, while karyon, as mentioned earlier, means kernel or nucleus. The transition from prokaryotes to eukaryotes enabled life to diversify even more. Whereas prokaryotic cells enable unicellular life only, eukaryotic cells can support multicellular life too. And it was about 1 million years ago that the first multicellular organisms emerged. It took another 500 million years for the first plants and simple animals to evolve. At this stage, the atmosphere of Earth was oxygenated. The photosynthesizing prokaryotes and the emerging plants had changed the abiotic components of Earth and thus influenced the biotic component. Over the next hundreds of millions of years, fish and amphibians made an appearance, insects and reptiles followed, and they were joined by mammals and birds. It is only in the last 200,000 years that humans, as we know us today, have emerged. In terms of how long life exists on Earth, we have been around for about 0.005% of that time. To put it in some sort of perspective, if the 4 billion years of life on Earth were represented by a single day, humans have existed for about 4 seconds of that day. And a span of an average human life would be a single millisecond. What a precious gift we have been given. Let me rewind back to the story of prokaryotes giving rise to eukaryotes. The process of prokaryotes giving rise to eukaryotes is known as endosymbiosis. Endo means within or inside, so endosymbiosis means living together within one another. Endosymbiotic theory or symbiogenesis is currently the leading evolutionary theory that explains the emergence of eukaryotes. The evidence for this is provided by two organelles found within eukaryotes, mitochondria and chloroplasts. These organelles have their own genetic material and reproduce independently of the cell in which they happen to be. The endosymbiotic theory goes back to 1905 and Konstantin Merezhkovsky, a Russian botanist who proposed that eukaryotes might be a result of a bigger prokaryote engulfing a smaller one. Around the same time, a German botanist, Andreas Schimper, suggested that chloroplasts in plant cells originated from independent organisms. And it was in 1967 that Lynn Margulis, an American botanist, provided microbiological evidence that supported these notions. And later, in the 1980s and 1990s, researchers discovered similarities between the genetic material of mitochondria and chloroplasts and certain bacteria. Scientific theories take time. They might seemingly start as wide-eyed left-field ideas, but every now and then, after a lot of hard work by a lot of good people, some of those ideas are proven correct. Speaking of theories, earlier I stated that cells are seen as the fundamental unit of life. This is part of the cell theory. It has three main components. 1. All living things are composed of cells and products of cells. 2. Cells are the lowest level of biological organization that can perform all the activities required for life, such as take in and transform energy to grow, repair, and reproduce. And 3. New cells come from pre-existing cells. It is in part because of the cell theory that viruses are not considered alive. They do not have a cell. Viruses are tiny bits of genetic material wrapped inside a protein coat. They cannot reproduce independently. We are not going to spend time exploring viruses, but it should be noted that their nature, genetic lineage, and the role in the evolution of life is still being researched. So no, this video is not going to go viral. That is all for now, and I will see you on the flip side.